Okay, well, it was, of course, I was very young. I was only 4 years old, and obviously I didn't quite understand what was going on, except I know the Germans were coming over and dropping bombs on us, and they could kill us. But, of course, that didn't mean a great deal to me, but it just felt very frightening. And, of course, to start with, we slept at night in the house, but we always slept with during the Blitz, we slept with our clothes on, so that we could get up in the night and our coat would be over the bed like a blanket, and we would put that on as soon as we got up. And, of course, the first night I remember was I was fast asleep having dreams, very nice dreams, and my sister, who was only 8 herself, came to wake me up to say that the bombs were coming and the Germans were coming, and I got to get up and go down to the shelter. Now, I was very sleepy and I didn't quite know what was going on, but I had to do as I was told. And so I got up and my sister helped me with my coat, and we went downstairs, and the Anderson shelter was at the bottom of the garden. So, and we weren't allowed to take any torches or candles outside because of attracting attention to the Germans who were up in the planes in the sky. So we had to walk in darkness, which was very scary. But on that particular night, as far as I can remember, it was that night, there was a full moon. And so the garden was really lit up and wasn't as dark as usual. So the Anderson shelter felt just a black shadow at the bottom of the garden, as if it was to me as a child, I thought it was a big monster hiding there. But my sister reassured me. I mean, she was only a child herself at 8, and she reassured me that, we're going to be safe in there, and I got to go. And of course I could remember that there were loads of creepy crawlies in there. And children and creepy crawlies, I wasn't very happy. And I thought I had to try and be big and brave. And so I closed my eyes really tight so it was dark. But I still had to go into the shelter. And my big brother, who I think was 12 at the time, he helped me down into the shelter because it's quite a big drop for a child. It was, as you know yourself, it was dug into the ground. And, of course, our air raid shelter was not gentrified in any way whatsoever. It was just a bare shelter. I think there was some waterproof on the ground that my brother had put there. And my mother had supplied some cushions and blankets. And there were 9 of us, plus my mother. No, at the time, actually, one sister wasn't born, so there would have been 8 children and my mother at that time. My youngest sister wasn't born till 1942, so that was a year later, or 2 years later, probably. Anyway, I jumped into the shelter and we all snuggled up together, and my eldest sister, who we had a nickname of Topsy, she used to cuddle me a lot, and she cuddled me that night and sang to me because she had a lovely, lovely voice. And so she sang songs and we all joined in and kept each other happy. But there was no light, no cooking facilities, but my mother always provided a tin of biscuits, which are broken biscuits bought from the local Woolworth store because they were cheap. My mum didn't have much money. We were a very poor family, but we used to love them. And we chose biscuits to keep us happy. And my mum would take some bottles of milk, which were very cheap too at that time. And we just had milk and biscuits, which we thought were lovely. And I suppose at some point I probably fell asleep because I was being cuddled, fed, and so on, and generally made to feel safe. But to start, before I fell asleep, I was scared of the spiders and beetles and things that used to crawl around, so I had to try and cut them off from my mind completely, because to me as a small child they were very scary. But And then, of course, when we woke up in the morning, early hours of them, I don't know what time we went down to the shelter, but it was certainly quite in the early hours of the morning, I suppose 1 o'clock or something like that, 1 a.m. And eventually, of course, the Germans stopped bombing. We could feel the bombs in the shelter. The ground used to shake. You could feel the ground shaking when bombs were dropping nearby. And, of course, we had no idea what was going on outside. We wouldn't know if our house was bombed until the raid stopped and we came out of the shelter. No idea at all, but it was certainly obvious that there were bombs nearby because we could feel the ground rumbling and shaking, and that was quite scary and would wake me up if I was sleeping. And then eventually we were able to leave, but not before our house was inspected. Billy, I think, looked out to see if it was still there, and he said it was. And of course, we all cheered when that happened because we thought we were so lucky to still have our house. It was badly bombarded, so windows broken and that sort of thing, but we still had our house. But a bomb had dropped down. I remember this distinctly, that a bomb had dropped on our house but didn't explode, and it ran down to the gutter and stayed there. But the air raid warden who was inspecting had to give us permission to come out of the shelter, wouldn't let us come out because he said it had to be made safe before we could come out. And I think that took about another hour or something like that. And when it was all clear, we came out. And my mother, I mean, we were all very tired, and it was still, I think the sun was just beginning to rise, so it was still dark, and we all went back to bed, and then we had to get up to go to school. But when we got to the school, they sent us all back again. It was quite a walk for me to school. It could have been well over a mile. And I had to take my gas mask with me, which was in a box over my shoulder. But when we got there, the school sent us all home again because it had been badly bombed in places, making it impossible for us to be taught. So back we went, and we wandered around all the places near our home which had been bombed. My brothers wanted to collect shrapnel, and of course they loved this. It was a great prize. Girls weren't allowed to have shrapnel. It was boys' stuff. And it was very sharp, and I always wanted some. I did ask Billy for some at one time, my big brother. But I had to give it back to him because it was too sharp for me to hold, and I had nothing to put it in. So, but it was amazing to me as a child to look at it, because it had all sorts of colours in the bombshell. You know, that there were all different colours of pinks and blues and greens, just like a rainbow to a child. But we wandered around the bomb sites of houses that had been bombed, and it was very sad because you saw all these, some of them had lost the whole of the front of their house, and you could see all into their rooms, and all their things were scattered around. It was very heartbreaking. And I could see lots of toys which would interest me, because I didn't have many toys as a child, and I would have loved to have had some of them, but we weren't allowed, of course. Policemen were around keeping an eye on the area, making sure nobody stole anything. And one distinct memory I have is of a teddy bear lying on its belly as if it was crying. And I couldn't understand. I wanted to rescue it. And my sister said, no, you can't. But I couldn't understand why I couldn't, because it looked so lonely, and I wanted to pick it up and cuddle it. And my sister pointed out that there was a policeman over there, and I wasn't to touch it. And, of course, that frightened me enough to shut me up. But, yes, it was frightening for me. I knew it was scary, but I wasn't really old enough to understand what being dead meant. but I know that we were very lucky to survive. We were never bombed out, but we did get bomb damage at times, but we never lost our home. So we were very lucky. And I just remember doing as I was told. I never really understood half the time why, but there we go. It was just one of those things.
So did you have did you have on that first night? Do you recall? Did you guys have gas masks inside the shelter?
No, we didn't ever put them on, and we would have been warned by air raid wardens if we had to put them on, but we didn't. We had to have practice at school. When we went to school, we had to put them on every morning so that we knew how to do it. They were very hard to put on, I have to say, and very ugly. I didn't like mine. I always cried because I had what was called a Mickey Mouse mask, which was different colour, and it had a flappy tongue, or I don't know what it was, but I found it very scary. It wasn't like Mickey Mouse at all. But it was called Mickey Mouse to try and pacify me. Mm. But we had to put it on every morning, but I couldn't put it on in my class because it was too difficult. The teacher had to put it on for us, so that we could have all been gassed meanwhile. I'm just going to take a gulp of water.
No, that's fine.
Okay, I'm getting a bit dry with talking. But we did have practice, but we never had to use them because the gas never came. But it was in case it did. And if it did, we would have had a warning. And I don't know what sort of warning, but we would have been warned somehow, either by a siren a message or what, or the air raid wardens would come and knock on the doors. I don't know, but we would have been warned and we would have had to put the gas masks on.
Do you have any...
But we never had to do that.
Oh, well, that's certainly good.
Yeah.
Do you have any specific recollections of the air raid sirens themselves? You know, that's kind of... It's such a, you know, when you hear that siren, it's got that visceral sound that just, I don't know.
If I hear it now, Christian, I shudder, and I put my hands up to my ears. It brings it all back, and I have to be very careful. It can make me cry, even now, to hear that siren. And I'm always surprised how bad I am. Even now, at the age of 83, anything to do with the war upsets me. I've just seen the film 1917. I know it was the First World War, but it still left me in a state of shock. I could hardly leave the cinema. I was in such a shocked state. And it still affects me to this day. If I hear it on the television, I sink inside. It's a terrible sound. And to children, it was horrifying. We hated it. It was the all clear we liked to hear.
Mm-hmm. I know that first night, and you were so young that it obviously was difficult to tell what exactly was going on. I mean, as time progressed and you got into the shelter, did you feel a little bit more safe as time went on? As you gained more of an understanding of what was going on, or?
It was always scary, but it was never as bad as the Blitz. After the Blitz stopped, it came easier. We didn't have to go down to the shelter so regularly. We could use the Morrison shelter in the house because the danger was reduced. But there was still a danger. And of course the flying bombs, which came late in the war, were really scary. And I mean, I have great memories of the flying bombs because one of them killed my dad. And I actually saw the one that killed my father because I was out shopping for my mum with my big sister, trying to buy my dad's tea. He was on Home Guard duty and he was on the local railway station. And a flying bomb came over on our way to the shops and it stopped right above our heads. And I said to my sister, oh, we're going to be killed, we're going to be killed. And we went and laid down in somebody's front garden. A window cleaner was cleaning windows, and he said to us, lie flat, lie flat. And we did. And we heard this, I saw this bomb, and I saw its fiery tail, and I saw the fiery tail stop, go out, which means it was going to drop. And it looked as if it was right above me. And I just put my hands on my ears, expecting it to drop, not really understanding what would happen if it dropped on me. But that's what I was expecting. But it obviously dropped somewhere else because I could feel the ground rumble, but it was obviously a bit further away at the railway station where my dad was, but I didn't know that at the time. And anyway, my sister and I just got up and we went to the local shops where we bought the fish, and everybody was saying where it had dropped, where it had dropped. And my brother and sister were, my sister was working in a local factory there, and that was very close to the railway station. And we thought that could be, she was in danger. And I think Billy was out. I can't remember now, but I think Billy was out, my oldest brother, who was 12, and I didn't know whether he was at home. My mother felt a lot safer when we were all at home and the bombs came. But of course we were scattered, so she was very frightened that me and my sister may have got caught by this bomb. She didn't know where it dropped either, but knew it was very close to home. But later on we discovered that it was a railway station, and my dad hadn't come home for his tea. And of course my brother and my uncle, my dad's brother, had to go and identify his body. And we discovered that he had been killed. And that was a terrible, terrible time, and I can remember that very distinctly. But that was with the flying bombs. He was killed on the 23rd of June, I think it was, in 1944. So, it's a lot later than the Blitz. But so we had spasms during the war when it was risky. And of course we had the V2s after the flying bombs, and we had to cope with those as well. They were very scary because they just came very quickly. But I have fewer memories of the V2 than I have of the doodle bugs, as we called the flying bombs. But my memory's very vague for bits of the war, of course, because I suppose I wasn't so directly affected. But I know during the quiet times we used to go under the Morrison shelter where we could play still while the air raid was on. And my mother very seldom went into the Morrison shelter. But I don't know, as far as I can go, really.
Yeah, because from what I've read about the V1s and the V2s, they made a very, very distinct sound as they were coming over, as they were coming down too.
Yeah. Oh, the drone of it was terrible. And you hear, even now, if I hear it on a film on the television or see it in the cinema, I hear this drone going, oh, terrible. It affects me still. I don't expect it to, because I don't think I've remembered it, but as soon as I hear it, the memory reacts. It's really weird.
It is interesting.
I get over it quite quickly, but it's really terrible at the time. And the air raid shelter the air raid war siren brings tears to my eyes, always.
It's strange. It's almost like a type of post-traumatic stress disorder in a way.
Yeah, I suppose it must be. It's a past. It's buried deep in my unconscious, and it's past. But it's only the sounds that I react to. I don't react to any of that I read. But if I read some of it out to people from my book, that can make me get tears in my eyes. It brings it all back very real when I read it out. It's very, very strange.
It is interesting. It's kind of like, when you smell something from your past, how it triggers that part of your brain. It just takes you back in time so suddenly. And
yes, it does. It's exactly the same. And of course, one has pleasant memories when that can happen. but the unpleasant ones also come back.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, because I was so young, I suppose my memories aren't as sharp as my older brothers and sisters, most of whom are dead now. My youngest sister, that was born in 1942, so is 77, is the only one alive, and me. I've lived a lot longer than my siblings lived. At 83. Most of them were dead by the time they were 80 or 82. I've lived slightly longer. My brother, Billy, he lived to be 89 and only died last year, just before his 90th birthday. So he was always around, and it was strange how he continually, throughout his life, took over the role of my dad for me and my two younger sisters.
Sure.
He was a daddy figure for us. He looked after us. Even as an adult, he took an interest in everything I was doing. So when I did my painting or wrote my story, he was really interested. And I used to sell my stuff on a market stall, my art, because I turned it into cards to sell them. And he took a great interest and would come and see what was going on. Even when I was a really grown person, it was really lovely, because when my dad died, my mum said to him, when my dad got killed, my mum said to him, "You have now got to be the man of the family." Mm-hmm. I had two younger brothers, one of whom died at the age of 13, and my other brother died when he was only 74 from a stroke, and Bill died at the age of 89, nearly 90, which was only last year. And he was 8 years older than me. My older sister was 9 years older than me. And my mum died when she was 82, and I was in my 50s, I think. I was born when my mother was 29. She had I was the seventh child, and she was only 29. I mean, she was a very amazing woman, I must say. And writing my book made me much more aware of how amazing she was.